Hello everyone and welcome to the Dyslexia Life Hacks Show. I'm your host Matthew Head, and in this episode I'm talking to Edward Sabbagh. He's a recent graduate from Brooklyn College, where he studied a BA in Business Administration and Management, and now works as a management within a dental practice. As a recent graduate, I thought it'd be really interesting to see what it's like being new to the world of work, but knowing about dyslexia and education. As always, I'll put links to things we talk about in the show notes, which will be available at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. Welcome to the show, Edward.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Excited to be here.
No worries at all. Where I wanted to kick today's episode off with is, what's it like actually growing up in Brooklyn? Because me being a Brit, I've seen a few things of TV dramas in Brooklyn, but it's probably not quite the same as real life, eh?
Definitely an experience. It's really very fast-paced.
Yeah.
Cut the road. But at the same time, I have a lot of my family living close by to each other, which I'm really just lucky to have. And it's really just awesome being so close to Manhattan, having it right by my doorstep. So I definitely took advantage as a kid, always going to the city and really just exploring and getting that independence was really so fun from a young age, taking the subway with my friends. It's really just a cool experience from a young age that I had.
Oh, nice. Cool. That's got to be fairly intimidating as a kid taking the New York subway, isn't it?
Definitely a little intimidating. But as my parents always just taught me, you have to stand up straight and don't put your head down.
Yeah.
And just confidence. And they instilled confidence in me and it reflected. And I used to always just tell my friends the same thing. We can't be on our phones. And we were just always just so self-aware.
Yeah,
so it was a little intimidating, but it definitely taught us traits from a young age that I see peers around me learning from all over the States at an older age. So it's cool having that.
Yeah, that is really interesting. So talk about traits from a younger age. And I mean, that sounds like your parents are trying to instill some resilience in you and make you world wise at that point. But I understand from listening to previous things with you, you knew you were dyslexic at a fairly young age. Do you want to elaborate on how you found out about that?
So I really found out from a young age. I went to a yeshiva, which is, for those who aren't familiar, it's a Jewish school program where it's half of the day is English studies, half of the day is Hebrew studies. So from grade 5, I switched out to a more of a school that was concentrated and focused on the learning disability. But before that, I was always having the opportunity to get pulled away from my class to make sure that I was comprehending and really making sure that everything was clear and I was processing everything. It was challenging just because everyone was really flourishing and excelling on very simple stuff. And I always knew there was something up. I didn't know that it was obvious that it was dyslexia until probably I switched out of the school program just because I was still a little naive and I still wasn't, I guess, fully aware. I was more in like that denial stage.
Yes.
But I also didn't know any better because I was still 8 years old in 5th grade. I was still very young. And
So what was the catalyst that led you to being switched out of regular school into more specialist education? What kind of kicked that off?
It was really just my parents. They saw that I was getting home at very late times throughout the 10-month school period. And it was really just taking a toll, balancing a second language. And really, they knew at the end of the day that obviously they wanted me to master and own all of my secular English skills and really have them to the fullest advantage I could possibly have. So really, they had just the help of, I guess, close family, friends, relatives also. They were just saying that the specialized education would really just help me and take everything to the next level by introducing me to the right teachers that had the right curriculum and the right credential, like almost like the credential, like not credentials, but they've had like focused education.
Yes.
They had their masters and they really specialized in that education. So that's what it comes down to.
Okay. So did you still study Hebrew and some of the other sort of Jewish stuff alongside as well? Were you still doing the split?
Definitely studied it on the side.
Okay.
And it's great but it was really, I was mainly focusing on just English. I was having tutors and specialists after school multiple times, at least 2 to 3 days a week, even in the summer times. I was really just focused because I knew that I was still at that young age. And my parents really valued that I wasn't fully developed, and they tried to take advantage of that to the fullest.
Yeah, that's really good of them. So when did you officially sort of find out? Obviously, your parents sort of noticed you were sounded like you were having to do a lot of hours to keep up with everything. Not only that, you're building on learning 2 languages and a sort of separate parts with your education. It just adds to your workload. So you moved to special school and get more assistance. Did you get tested for dyslexia then, or was that something that came along later on?
I got tested, yes. And it was actually through this school that I attended, was through the state of New York also. It was really very helpful just having a lot of those resources that were just given to us from the state. I think there's special laws that actually entitled learning disabilities for special education and having better accommodations, smaller classroom sizes, and really just having more of a relationship with the teacher instead of being in a larger classroom and not having, I guess, that support.
Yes. So am I understanding correctly? My initial read was that maybe you got moved into more of a privately funded school, but actually it's still a state school, but it's a US law in the state that gave you the extra help.
It was a private school that I attended that was through the state of New York that helped really focus on the special education.
Okay, that makes sense. So walking through school, not only did you get a more focused education, small class size, did they bring anything else in to assist you with your dyslexia at the time?
They were just, from what I really remember is just how caring and how understanding. They had so much empathy, and I wasn't feeling rushed, or I never had pressure that I had to get my 20 homework questions done by the end of the night unless I'm going to get in trouble. They always just had empathy, as opposed to where I came from. There wasn't that much understanding, just because I don't think that the teachers really had a focus on that. So really being understood, I felt almost accepted because I saw my peers were still struggling with similar problems and similar tasks that I was struggling with. So I felt accepted also, which was really, really unbelievable. That helped my self-esteem definitely a lot.
Yes. Yeah, that's really good. And did that sort of help you along? And then you got to college. Did you then go back into more mainstream education by that point?
Yes, I did. Throughout high school, I went through pretty mainstream education.
Okay. So she's
just really very helpful, helped me prepare for college.
Yes.
It was definitely a little overwhelming at first starting college, just because I was going back to a large classroom setting.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy, but really what helped me was just staying organized and having the right time management skills. I always had that just from a kid, prioritizing, all right, I can't go out with my friends until I finish all X, Y, and Z. And I always had that because I was doing the tutoring. I was always missing out on the sports games. I was always missing summer days with my friends. So I always had, I guess, that sacrifice from a young age. So I really knew what it would feel like before almost my siblings would know how it would make them feel. So really, definitely, I did benefit a lot. But college was still overwhelming. I started right before the pandemic started. It was also a little rough.
Yeah. Just to make it more complicated. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of remote learning, I assume.
Definitely. A lot of remote learning on Zoom.
Okay. And you mentioned your siblings. Are any of them dyslexic at all? Or is it something you know that runs in your family?
Not that I know that it runs in my family.
Okay.
I have 3 siblings, 2 older sisters and a younger brother.
Yeah.
All of them are really, really very sharp. They're academically very, very smart, on top of their games and on top of their crafts.
Yeah.
And it was a little tough as a kid, really just almost comparing. My parents would always say, never compare. And it was tough as a kid, not really realizing the significance. But now, obviously, the older I get, the more I realize how our skill sets are completely different. But in time, I didn't know that. And I feel like if I knew that maturity and that mindset 10 years ago or 12 years ago, however long it was, I feel like that would really be crucial and would even help and take my confidence to the next level at that age.
Yes. So I was going to ask you that actually. So we'll come back to how you feel now as an older person later. But as a kid, you sort of mentioned your sort of siblings felt more talented than you do, I guess. But your parents were encouraging by saying not compare. But was there stuff that you had the inklings of that now looking at hindsight that you're like, actually, I was able to do these things that maybe my sisters or brother weren't able to do as well, even though they were academically more gifted?
There was definitely, I guess, certain tasks and just certain skills, I guess, that I did have different. I was very creative. I had a lot of just emotional intelligence and going back to empathy, which was really just neat because I always saw past, I guess, like a situation. Living in New York, living in Brooklyn, for example, there's just unfortunately so many homeless people all over. Almost hurts my heart. And I would, no joke, get attached to every person I would see as a kid. And I would never just understand. I would always have, I guess, that sort of, breed where I need to help. I need to save the world. I need to build on my purpose and make the world a better place. That's what really, I guess, started that spark with that dyslexia of trying to identify the meaning of everything, always asking questions. That's what really separated, trying to ask as many questions as possible because I needed answers to everything from the smallest stuff to the biggest stuff.
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah, and it's really interesting, isn't it? You start thinking of the big questions and particularly when you're studying. Did you ever find that, I used to do this, that you go down a rabbit hole of looking into other things when you're like, wow, that's really interesting. And then you realize, actually, that's not going to help me write this report, but now I know more about some other thing.
Exactly. I was always getting distracted as a kid.
Yeah.
And now still I am, but I try to just apply everything to the best of my ability. But it's definitely, I was always getting sidetracked. My mind was just always wandering, which obviously in the present time, I was never focusing on it. But now it's really unbelievable. My mind's always thinking 24 hours a day, and I come up with the greatest ideas at the most random times.
Fair enough. So obviously college in the pandemic, on Zoom, you're dyslexic. What does Brooklyn College do to help their dyslexic students? What were you finding in terms of assistance were you getting?
The business program that I was in was actually one of the smaller programs in the university, which was really helpful.
Yes.
With Zoom, it definitely worked to my advantage of trying to stick out. I, since a kid, was always trying to give value to each relationship that I've been making with. If it was an older cousin, or if it was a mentor, someone that I was trying to connect with, I was always just trying to separate myself. And on Zoom, I was trying to have that same approach where it was very just natural to me where I needed to have that professor to know who I was. So I was constantly emailing them. I was constantly wearing bright red shirts on Zoom just so they know who this kid is.
Yeah.
And definitely it really helped just because during the pandemic, there wasn't that much to do. So it was keeping me busy and trying to really perfect and really grow my relationships with my professors, along with also just having all of the accommodations that I had in high school, excuse me.
Okay.
It's really very helpful where I had extra time on my tests. I was allowed to have someone help me read if it was necessary.
Okay, yes, you got scribes and stuff like that. I used to find them quite useful at university for getting people to read stuff out or write it. Not necessarily a scribe, was it? You had somebody who'd read stuff to you. I did have somebody that I could talk to and they'd write it down for me.
Definitely. I didn't fully use it to the fullest advantage, but it was just very tough with Zoom and having lectures where they were recorded also. So it wasn't too necessarily hard where I would need someone by my side. I really learned to cope. I love listening to podcasts and to TED Talks, a lot of just different inspirational content online. So I'm really used to playing stuff over again, having 1.5 or double speed on.
Okay, yeah.
Listening to everything twice so I could hear it over and over again as I'm jotting my notes. So really, it was an experience that I think I tried to take advantage of. It's definitely challenging, but like anything else, I had a positive attitude, and I graduated actually a year early, also from university.
It was that's cool. Yeah. So did all your university degree happen during the pandemic, or did you manage to get some face-to-face time?
No, mostly. I got some face-to-face before the pandemic started. I had almost like a full year. It was about 75% of a year.
Yeah.
In face-to-face. And then I just went into remote learning until I finished for the next year.
So that's really interesting, though. So you managed to have all them curveballs, the remote learning and all that stuff. And I know you said about being used to consuming information online anyway with YouTube and podcasts, listen them at twice the speed or whatever. What did you do to graduate a year early? What steps did you put in place to make that happen?
I would always just ask myself, any situation that I encounter with work, with friendships, relationships, anything, is this problem going to be lasting in another month from now? The answer, if it's yes, I have to do it immediately. If it's no, I could put it off and I could really take my time on it. But mainly in college and the program and what I was giving myself and held myself accountable for was really just having the right time management skills and seeing what deadlines are first and just staying organized and building calendars on my phone or on my computer and just seeing what do I have to get done in the next 3 days. And then just slowly taking it small steps. And eventually I got the hang and I took over more responsibility. I was taking winter classes as well as summer classes.
Okay. So you just got a super productivity hack really with your calendar, and did you color code it and do all things like that to kind of have, ready the stuff I really must do now? And then kind of, how did that look in your mind, or how did it physically look to help with this kind of work-life planning?
A little stressful.
Yes.
Definitely stressful, especially just during finals and midterms, all the exams. It definitely wasn't easy, but I had just a lot of teachers that were understanding. I was always trying to give them almost my perspective of where I was coming from, the type of student I am when I was building that relationship. I think that really played a big role, where the professors all knew where I was coming from. They all knew my job at the time, where I was working, along with being in school. So they had the understanding, I guess, that I was working full-time 4 days a week in sales at the time.
Blimey, so you're working as well as doing college?
I was. Jeez. It was really exhausting.
Yeah. Did you sleep at any point in this juncture?
I slept a little. It was actually, I got introduced to coffee actually. And that was my first ever, I guess, introduction to really having coffee multiple times a day. And it was necessary.
Fuel of the Renaissance. Yes. That's really interesting. So what drove you there? What drove you to think, well, actually, I can get college done a year early? Because with all that workload and the neurodiversity and the remote learning, it could perfectly be acceptable to go, well, I'll just do it in the time allocated to me. So what really, really got you into, I want to do this early and finish it now?
I think it was just for myself, because really, as a kid, I was always just looking up to athletes and all these sport players. And I was just always thinking, wow, it's amazing how their entire lives, they work so hard to get to the highest stage, the professional league where they're at. And of course, maintaining and staying in that league is really hard, but it's amazing how they almost just got there. And a lot of these major athletes are just there for long periods of times. And I really thought to myself that with college, I really want to start to apply what I'm learning in university with also I'm doing with a profession. So it was really cool, hands-on, actually learning business ethics and learning all different types of skills from my major and all my major classes and applying it directly to how to persuade people, how to negotiate, how to try to direct a conversation, and really all these different types of stuff aside from the economics and all that. It really was just cool to actually have, I guess, those resources while I was working. So I think I just wanted more and more of that knowledge at the time while I was balancing out the work life.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's impressive to be able to get it done at you, really. So what year did you graduate in?
I graduated last year in June.
So 2022.
2022.
Yes. Oh, wow. And then you're out in the world of work. So that's kind of, you've only really got, not even quite a year worth of work experience out. So quite a few people I talked to on the podcast, they realize when they get into work that their experience with dyslexia and strengths they bring, as well as strategies they need to, shall we say, mitigate some of the other things, changes. Now, this is quite fresh in your mind because I imagine you're still learning it at the moment. So how is that working for you?
I'm always learning more about myself. I think really every few months I try to take on a different task, even if it's reading an extra book or if it's instead cutting out a little bit more of music time. And like I said, going back to listening to podcasts, I'm always trying to just strengthen my mind. I know that how powerful our minds are because just from a young age, my father was just always telling me that whatever you put in, the goal is not to forget and lose any information we're getting. We're trying to really just absorb and trying to take things much slower. That's what he was trying to tell me at a young age. And that's why I saw the significance in playing sports at a young age and being competitive and trying to play board games and trying to really see who I was outside from that dyslexia. Really interesting because it almost works hands on, which is really interesting. And I don't think that there's that many other things like that.
You worked in sales and now you're in management at a dentist. Now, what sort of things day to day do you tend to find you're strong at? And how do you think your dyslexic mind is helping with that?
I think definitely communicating, having empathy plays a really big role, like we were discussing before. And just really my organization skills are really very well.
Yeah. Yeah. And you alluded to earlier that you're learning more about dyslexia as an adult and more the positive strengths it brings. Now, what shifted your mindset in that? Was that listening to YouTube and podcasts and TED Talks on it? Or what really kind of started to open your mind up to not thinking it was some sort of like thing you were going to have that made you not as good academically as your sisters and brother?
So I had a reading specialist who really changed my life completely.
Okay.
I don't think I would be really here speaking to you or speaking on behalf of anyone without her. She really just changed my attitude, my mindset. And she told me that what I had with dyslexia is just like a superhero, like a superpower. And she said that I need to take the fullest advantage of it. But at the time, I really need to see who I am with it. And then once I grow out of it, I'm really going to see all the different benefits and skill sets of how I'm different from all my other peers. And she just had that empathy, and she seemed exactly, she knew what I was going through from the day I started with her. And my mother was there with me from the 5th grade, right when I switched out schools, which was really helpful. And we really built a strong relationship for about 2 years. And I really don't think that I would be half of the person if I am without just her support and her guidance, because she really played such a big role in having, I guess, that experience that I never had before. I'm always looking for people to look up to, aside from my family and aside from members in my community, and finally to see someone who knew exactly what I was going through socially and academically.
Yeah.
Really just awesome.
Yeah, it's really good when you meet somebody who, should we say, gets it.
Definitely.
So, and it really is great that it's changed your mindset on it, and that's allowed you to grow. And I imagine graduating university a year before you must have really built some confidence in you that, yes, you can do all this.
Yes, it was a blessing. It was really unbelievable. And now I take on that responsibility almost of what she's been doing and having that mentorship. And if there's people also that come from a similar situation, I'm always having that open arm, because really I know the significance of what a kid who doesn't even know who they are aside from school, especially just because at that age, school's the only thing we're thinking about, since we're in school for a third of the day, and then we're sleeping for a third of the day, and then we have another third of the day doing nonsense. It's really a large part of who we are from a young age all the way up until 17 or 18 years of age.
Yeah, definitely. It's the most dominant thing in your life until, so 18 odd, when you finally get to leave, I suppose. But no, that's really good. And you alluded to you're trying to help other people out. What is there anything particular you're doing with that apart from coming on podcasts like this?
There isn't yet. Okay. I'm really just trying to make my difference by sharing my story. But at the moment, there's not really yet. I'm trying and finding different ways to inspire people, but it's challenging, especially just because of, I guess, being a little bit probably young. But I'm trying to always expand my network and trying to meet as many people as possible. And that's why I think of you, how incredible and how big of an impact you're making.
Thank you.
And I really just told myself, Matt's a superstar, and what his vision, and he's seeing so many different people that have the same dyslexia and the same learning disability, but they all have different things to offer. And I think it's really cool because more than ever now, we're living in a world where we could reach out to any person just for a few clicks on the internet, and you could find out what their favorite food is, what university they want to go.
Yes.
It's amazing because I don't think any other generation had this. And I think that trying to use all of our resources, I know that I'm confident that I'll definitely be finding something soon to make that impact. But I'm definitely just trying to teach as many people as possible that aside from school, aside from education and work, there's so many people that we could aspire and we could look up to and really build a connection to. And I think that it's really something that we could take to the next level and really change many lives by finding ways of connecting to people across the world.
Yes, I think so. And I think it's important to get different points of view and different people's message out there. Like, you're a lot earlier on in your life than quite a few of my guests. So you're just at the beginning of your career, and you found out recently dyslexia has a positive side as well as maybe where you've been in education till sort of quite recently, it's not necessarily shine as much. And it's good that you're able to kind of understand that and push that forwards. And hopefully that allows you to grow within as a person as well as within the world of work. I mean, I imagine having a dyslexic brain and doing the New York Underground would be quite helpful in terms of reading the map.
Oh, there's so many just billboards also. There's so many different words and text fonts. It's really, as a kid, it was overwhelming.
Yeah.
Now I think it's just, I guess, normal. Nothing really like phases me while being exposed to everything on the subway. I find it so interesting though, how on the subway, really, there's so many people during rush hour.
Yeah.
Hundreds and hundreds of people in these carts that are scrambled in like sardines, and everyone focused on just themselves. And it's really amazing how there aren't too many people that are trying to share and trying to connect and build relationships with one another. I think that is like almost a perfect example of how the generation that we're in is evolving, where the artificial intelligence that everyone's been speaking about the past few months is getting so focused, where I think people are really forgetting the strong and the true values of building relationships and connecting and having emotion with each other. I think is really just crucial.
Yes, I think so. And I think you are right. The image of people stood on the London Underground or the New York subway, and it's like everybody sort of what floats around still looking at their mobile phone. And maybe we do need to look up occasionally.
Of course.
That brings me to start winding the podcast up, really. And every guest gets asked 3 rapid fire questions from me. They don't need quick answers from you. They are quick questions from me. So let's launch into question number 1. What prejudice have you had about dyslexia that's been proven wrong?
I was actually told in the 2nd grade from one of my teachers that I wasn't going to be able to read fluent English.
Oh,
forever. And I remember I got back to my mother, and it really just took a very tough toll on who I was, because at the time I was still discovering who I was. I was only in 2nd grade, and I almost felt that I wasn't getting understood, and I wasn't really having that right, probably the right resources on doing that. And I felt almost lost inside of my own body, and no one was able to help me.
Yeah, that's poor form of that teacher. So obviously you can read fluent English. Can you read fluent Hebrew as well?
I could read fluent in Hebrew, only stuff that I'm familiar with.
Right.
New material, I'm a little bit slower, but I pray daily, every day, at least in the morning. I'm trying to pray in the afternoons, which is a little bit of a challenge. But in the mornings, really, I have no problem. I pray anywhere from 30 minutes a day to an hour a day, depending on the day. And really, it's just definitely part of my mornings. I try to have the same routine every single day, which is great to have.
Yes, and there you go. So you can read fluent English as well as a reasonable grasp of Hebrew. So that's 2 languages down rather than just the one that they told you might not be able to read fluent in. So that's interesting. Right. Okay. So 2nd rapid fire question for me: if an alien landed and you had to describe dyslexia to them, how would you do it?
Wow, that's a great question.
Thank you.
That's a great question. That's a really good question. Let me take a minute. I want to try. Let's see. How would I describe dyslexia to an alien? Dyslexia is a learning disability that really is hard to differentiate different sounds visually and verbally. And basically, everything has to be taken into account by taking things slowly. And there's a lot of just different benefits from that, because taking things slowly, we're faced with rejection and not wanting the outcomes of what we want, and really just trying to master and perfect and trying to really work up, and having working through trial and error really plays a big role in what dyslexia is. Yeah, I think so. It's a good answer. And okay, and the final question in this rapid fire set of 3. Seeing as this is the Dyslexia Life Hacks Show, what is your favorite dyslexia life hack? My favorite dyslexia life hack has to be just staying true to who I am and not judging and not being too hard on myself. I really think that God created dyslexia with me, and he gave my understanding and my empathy. And I'm always trying to apply my dyslexia to anything that I'm encountering. If I'm meeting a new friend or if I'm networking at an event, I'm always trying to have my different outlooks of being an extrovert at the same time being an introvert, and always trying to be that nerd who could really just speak to any person and be peachy and bubbly. So I think it's really cool having just that flip where I'm really definitely balanced, I guess, in both socially and academically, where I have that crave for knowledge, but at the same time, I want to build relationships and I want to try to connect and meet as many people as possible that are making a difference, like you.
Thank you. Yes, a great hack. And that just leads me to ask you, really, is there any more you'd like to add? And if people want to get in contact with you, is that something they can do?
Definitely something they could do. They could feel free to shoot me an email. It's my first name, Edward, my last name, Sabbagh. It's the number 1@gmail.com.
Okay.
Love to really just help. If there's anyone that needs an ear, I would love to just really find out how I could help and be that mentor that I've always was looking for as a young child.
Great. Excellent. Well, that leads me to thank you for taking the time to come on the show this evening. And I want to thank everybody else for taking the time to listen. And I will talk to you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.